Good evening. You are listening to Blackout Radio. My name is Daniel Voss. It is just past 11 o'clock on what has become, in the span of the last 40 minutes, the most confusing night in recorded human history. We are receiving unverified but multiply-sourced reports from across the globe, from hospitals in London, from clinics in Mumbai, from emergency wards in Sao Paulo, all of them saying the same thing. That as of approximately 10:15 this evening, no human being on the planet appears to be aging, not slowing down, not declining in rate. Stopped completely. We are going to stay with you through the night.
I want to be clear about what we know and what we don't, because in moments like this, clarity matters more than anything. What we are hearing from, and I mean hearing from listeners, from wire services, from a staggering number of independent sources, is that biological aging has simply paused. Doctors are saying that cellular degradation has halted, that the ordinary biological processes which mark time in the human body have gone quiet. Families are calling their loved ones in hospices, and those patients who were expected to pass within days, are stable. Inexplicably, terrifyingly stable. And the word coming back from bedside after bedside is the same word, unchanged.
To be precise about the timeline, the first confirmed anomalies were logged at 22:17 UTC. That is when 3 separate research hospitals, one in Geneva, Switzerland, one in Seoul, South Korea, and one in Cape Town, South Africa, simultaneously flagged what they described as a systemic cellular irregularity in their patient populations. Within 11 minutes, the World Health Organization's emergency monitoring system had received over 400 independent alerts. By 22:40 UTC, the figure had risen to 11,000. We are now at 23:08 UTC. That is 51 minutes since the first confirmed anomalies. The alerts have not stopped coming in. The volume is accelerating, not slowing.
We have a listener message I want to read because it captures something important about where we are right now. This comes from someone identifying themselves as a nurse in Edinburgh, Scotland. They write, "I have been on shift for 6 hours. We have a patient here, 89 years old, end-stage organ failure, who was not expected to see morning. Her vitals have not just stabilized, they have strengthened. She opened her eyes an hour ago for the first time in 4 days. She asked for water. She asked where her daughter was. We don't know what to do. We don't know whether to celebrate or to be frightened. We are both. Most of us in this ward are both." I think that captures precisely where the world is right now.
On the political front, we have the following confirmed governmental responses within the first hour. The President of the United States has convened an emergency session of the National Security Council at the White House Situation Room. The European Council has called an extraordinary meeting for 6 a.m. Brussels time. China's State Council issued a brief statement 17 minutes ago stating, in direct translation, "The People's Republic is monitoring an unusual biological phenomenon and urges citizens to remain calm and trust in the guidance of the state." Russia has imposed a media blackout, pending what their foreign ministry is calling independent verification. India's Prime Minister's office has issued nothing, though all indications point to an active cabinet session.
The silence from some governments is almost as loud as the statements from others. And I think that silence tells us something important. That the people at the highest levels of power are just as lost as the rest of us. Because this event does not fit any protocol. There is no disaster manual for biological aging ceasing globally. There is no emergency response framework. There are no precedents anywhere in the documented history of our species. Every government on Earth tonight is improvising, and I think the public can sense that, which is part of why the fear is so widespread, and honestly, so understandable. This isn't panic without cause. This is rational alarm in the face of genuine uncertainty.
We are approximately 90 minutes into this event. I want to walk our listeners through the geographic scope, because this is not a regional anomaly. Reports are now confirmed from every inhabited continent. Antarctica's 2 active research stations have both reported the same observations among their respective personnel. The phenomenon appears universal. No demographic has been excluded. Age, ethnicity, sex, geography, altitude, pre-existing medical conditions. None of these appear to correlate with any variation in the effect. Everyone has stopped aging, from the youngest infant to the oldest verified living person, a 117-year-old woman in Okinawa, Japan. The biological clock appears to have been switched off simultaneously and completely.
2 hours in. I want to hold on something before we move further into the data, because data can make this feel abstract. A listener named Fatima writes from Lagos, Nigeria. My father has been dying for 3 months. Tonight he sat up in bed and called my name clearly. I am on my knees on this floor. I do not know if I am praying or screaming. Both feel the same. From a man in Toronto, Canada, name withheld. My mother has Alzheimer's. She has not known my name in 2 years. She still does not know my name, but she is not getting worse. She is simply here. Is this mercy? Is this cruelty? I cannot decide tonight, and I suspect I will not be able to decide for a very long time.
Infrastructure reports are now coming in alongside the medical ones, and I want to walk through them carefully. Emergency lines across Western Europe are reporting call volume surges of between 300 and 900% above normal for this hour of night. In Paris, France, the Emergency Services Dispatch Center has declared a communications overload event, meaning call wait times currently exceed 40 minutes. Similar reports from Madrid, Berlin, and Rome. In the United States, the 911 system in New York City alone has logged over 2 million calls in the last 30 minutes. Many of these, according to dispatch logs I have been sent, are people reporting that elderly relatives are, to quote directly from dispatch records, not dying when they should be.
Not dying when they should be. I want to sit with that phrase for a moment, because underneath the chaos and the infrastructure overloads, that is the human heart of what this is. People who are bracing themselves for the most painful kind of loss are suddenly suspended in something they have no word for. A hospice director in Brisbane, Australia reached us by email a few minutes ago. She says her staff are in shock. Not distressed, she clarifies, but shocked. She writes that they have spent their careers preparing people for death, sitting with families, holding hands, guiding people gently to the threshold. And tonight, the threshold is simply not there. Her exact words, "We don't know what we are anymore. We don't know what our job is now." And I find that profoundly, achingly human.
3 hours in. I want to give our listeners our first confirmed casualty figures, and I want to contextualize them carefully. The deaths being attributed to this event are not deaths from aging stopping. They are deaths resulting from the chaos and panic surrounding the event itself. Road accident fatalities attributed to distracted or panicked drivers are being reported across multiple cities. In Sao Paulo, Brazil, there were 47 confirmed road fatalities in a 2-hour window beginning around 11 p.m. local time. In Jakarta, Indonesia, a stampede at a major hospital where crowds had gathered seeking information resulted in 19 confirmed deaths and over 200 injuries. In Cairo, Egypt, a structural failure at an overloaded emergency services call center killed 11 people. Across all confirmed reports, we are currently tracking 147 deaths directly attributable to event-related chaos. That number is expected to rise.
147 people. I want to say that number out loud and let it stand, because in a night when the concept of death has become philosophically strange and surreal, it is important to acknowledge that real people have died in the last 3 hours in very ordinary and very terrible ways. In car crashes, in crowd crushes, in collapsing infrastructure, because the world reacted to this news with its full, terrifying capacity for panic. And those deaths are part of the story. They are not footnotes to a miraculous event. They are the human cost of confusion and fear. And they remind us that even in the most extraordinary circumstances, the most ordinary dangers do not pause. The roads did not care that aging stopped. Gravity did not care.
I want to address the scientific dimension now, because we are getting more substantive information from research institutions. The preliminary consensus forming among biologists and cellular scientists, and I stress this is preliminary, nothing has been peer-reviewed, nothing formally published, is that what appears to have occurred is a global cessation of what scientists call cellular senescence. Cellular senescence is the process by which cells lose the ability to divide and function properly over time. It is, in the most fundamental biological sense, the engine of aging. According to early analyses from labs in Zurich, Tokyo, and Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, that process has simply stopped, not slowed, not reversed. It has stopped. The mechanism behind the cessation remains entirely, completely unknown.
4 hours into the event. I want to share something from a listener in Lyon, France, who identifies herself only as a terminal cancer patient, 44 years old. She writes, "I had made my peace. I said what I needed to say to everyone I love. I let go of the things I was holding too tightly, and now I don't know what I'm holding on to or why I'm holding it. I am not cured. I still have the cancer. But I am being told I won't continue to age, and I don't know how to place that information anywhere in my mind. I am not sure whether to be angry or grateful. Right now, I am just exhausted." I think her exhaustion is the most honest response anyone has given to this night so far.
4 hours and 30 minutes in, aviation is significantly impacted, and I want to give a full status. The FAA in the United States has issued a ground stop advisory for all major airports, citing emergency communications overload and air traffic controller capacity concerns. Heathrow Airport in London has suspended all departures. Singapore's Changi Airport, one of the world's busiest transit hubs, is operating at 30% capacity. The issue is not simply staffing. It is that a significant percentage of air traffic controllers, commercial pilots, and ground crew across the globe have abandoned posts or are unable to maintain operational focus amid communications chaos. We have reports of 23 commercial flights that declared emergencies in the last 2 hours due to cockpit crew incapacitation, panic attacks in the overwhelming majority of cases. All 23 aircraft landed safely.
The fact that all 23 landed safely is something I want to hold on to, because inside all this chaos, there are people doing extraordinary things. Air traffic controllers working through what must be personal terror to talk planes home. Nurses staying at bedsides even when the bedsides have stopped making clinical sense. Police officers managing crowds when they themselves have no answers to give to the people asking. There is something in human beings, and I have seen it in every disaster I have covered across this career. An instinct to show up, to stay, to do the work even when the work has stopped making sense. Tonight, that instinct is the thing standing between order and something much worse.
5 hours in. Supply chain and logistics reporting. Major shipping ports are experiencing serious disruption. The Port of Rotterdam, Europe's largest, has suspended operations citing staff shortages and an inability to process customs documentation amid collapsed communication systems. The Port of Shanghai has reported similar conditions. In the United States, the Port of Los Angeles is operating at roughly 40% of normal capacity. Supermarkets in 17 countries have reported panic buying surges, with particular shortages developing in bottled water, preserved foods, and pharmaceutical products. Pharmacies in Tokyo, London, Paris, and across the American eastern seaboard have completely run out of anti-anxiety medications, sedatives, and sleep aids. Supply chain analysts are describing the demand spike as, and I am quoting directly, unprecedented and non-modelable.
Non-modelable. That is a phrase I never expected to hear applied to human behavior, but here we are. Because what is driving people to strip pharmacy shelves is not rational emergency preparation. It is the need to do something. Anything. When the thing happening to you is incomprehensible, the human response is often action. Even action that does not logically address the threat. Buying bottled water does not make aging resume or stop. But it feels like doing something concrete in a night where nothing is concrete. We have received messages from people who drove to their parents' houses in the middle of the night, who called estranged siblings they have not spoken to in years, who woke their children up just to hold them in the dark. That is also doing something, and I think it might be the more important kind.
6 hours into the event. Government emergency measures are now being implemented broadly. The United States has declared a national emergency under the Stafford Act. FEMA is activating its full emergency response network. Though officials are candid in briefings that the agency's protocols were designed for physical disasters, earthquakes, hurricanes, disease outbreaks, and not for an event of this nature. The European Union has convened its full Emergency Management Council and is coordinating between member states to manage hospital capacity and communications infrastructure. Australia has mobilized its defense forces to assist with civil order after significant crowd gatherings outside hospitals in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane became unmanageable for local police alone. The Philippines has declared a state of national calamity, with a midnight curfew imposed across Manila and surrounding provinces.
The curfew in Manila deserves attention, because Manila is a city of 14 million people, and the scenes being described by people messaging us from there are extraordinary. Enormous gatherings in public squares, not riots, not destruction, but people needing to be near other people, people lighting candles in the streets, people singing quietly. A listener writes from Manila, "There are thousands of us in Luneta Park right now. Nobody organized this. We just came. We don't know what to do, so we came to be together. The children are asleep on the grass. The adults are talking in low voices. There is an old man near me who is crying, and I do not know if it is from fear or relief, and I'm not sure he knows either." That image will stay with me.
7 hours into the event. I want to turn to the hospital bed crisis, which is one of the most significant secondary consequences emerging. Hospitals globally are facing what health systems experts are calling a paradoxical emergency. Their palliative care wards and end-of-life units are full of patients who are no longer dying, but are also not recovering. They are suspended, stable but not improving. This is creating an acute bed shortage simultaneously across multiple countries. In the United Kingdom, the National Health Service has declared a national major incident, the highest available emergency alert level, not because of traditional casualties, but because of what one NHS spokesperson described as the complete disruption of patient flow through the end-of-life pathway. In plain terms, the beds needed for incoming emergency patients are occupied by patients who cannot be discharged and are no longer dying.
What we're describing sounds bureaucratic when you put it in those terms. Bed shortages, patient flow disruptions. But what it actually means is this. There are people in those beds who have lived long lives, who said their goodbyes over days or weeks, who made their peace, who let go, who chose the music for their services, and who are now in a kind of limbo they did not ask for and did not choose. I do not know what the right word is for that. It might be miraculous. It might be horrifying. It might be both at once, and that simultaneity is something our language was not built to hold. Families who gathered to say goodbye are standing in corridors tonight, not knowing whether to go home or stay. Some of them have been there for days already. Nobody prepared them for this.
8 hours in. Death toll update. Confirmed global fatalities attributed to the secondary effects of this event now stand at 612. Breakdown by cause. Road fatalities account for 219. Crowd-related incidents. Stampedes, crush injuries, falls in panicked gatherings account for 143. Acute cardiac events among individuals already in critical condition who experienced severe distress upon receiving news of the event account for 107. Hospital-related incidents, including medication errors amid overwhelmed staff, falls, and at least 3 confirmed cases of patients in psychiatric facilities who became violent, account for 78. 65 deaths remain under investigation. These are confirmed figures. Unconfirmed reports from regions with communications failures suggest the real figure may be significantly higher.
612. I want to say that clearly and hold it. And I want to add something to Daniel's breakdown that the numbers alone cannot convey. Among those cardiac deaths, those 107 people who died of acute distress, a significant number were, by all accounts in the case files reaching us, people who had been told by doctors that they might now live longer than expected. The shock of that revision, the sudden radical overturning of everything they had emotionally and logistically prepared for, was, in some cases, literally lethal. And I find that one of the most heartbreaking dimensions of this entire event. For some people, the news of extended life was the thing that killed them. The cruelty of that is almost too precise.
9 hours in. I want to address the religious dimension of this event, because it has become impossible to ignore from a sociological standpoint, and because several major institutions have now issued formal statements. The Vatican issued a communiqué 1 hour ago from the Holy See, reading in part, "The Holy Catholic Church urges prayer, calm, and trust in the providence of God. Whether this event is of divine origin, natural origin, or otherwise remains in the hands of continued inquiry and theological discernment. What is certain is that every human life retains its sacred and inviolable dignity regardless of its duration. The Chief Rabbinate of Israel has called for emergency theological consultation. The Grand Mosque of Mecca has urged Muslims worldwide to pray and to support the vulnerable in their communities. Buddhist councils in Thailand and Japan have convened emergency sessions to discuss doctrinal implications.
What strikes me about all of those statements is what they share, which is that none of them know what to say. They are all reaching, genuinely and earnestly, for language to fit something that has never happened before. Every major religion has a framework for death, for its meaning, its timing, its aftermath, the way to walk toward it with dignity. What they do not have is a framework for death's suspension, for a world in which the natural end of life simply does not come. We received a message from a minister in Atlanta, Georgia, who writes, "I stood at my pulpit tonight with 100 frightened people looking at me for answers. I told them I didn't have one. I told them we would sit with the question together, and that sitting with questions we cannot answer is also a form of faith. It was the most honest sermon I have ever given."
10 hours in. I want to give our listeners a global economic snapshot because the markets have responded, where they have been open, with extreme volatility. The Tokyo Stock Exchange opened 4 hours ago and immediately suspended trading after the Nikkei index fell 19% in the first 20 minutes, the largest single session drop in the exchange's recorded history. Hong Kong's Hang Seng suspended trading at opening. In Europe, where markets are opening within the hour, financial regulators across the Eurozone have preemptively announced trading halts pending what they are calling an assessment of systemic economic risk. The sectors most severely impacted in pre-market trading globally are life insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies focused on age-related treatments, pension fund operators, and long-term care facility operators. The insurance sector in particular is down an average of 63% across pre-market indices.
The life insurance dimension is something I want to stay with because it connects economic abstraction to real human lives. Life insurance exists on a foundational premise. People die, and the timing of death, while unpredictable for any individual, is statistically modelable across a population. That model has ceased to exist in the last 10 hours. Every actuarial table ever written is now mathematically meaningless. And what that means in practical human terms is that the financial safety nets built on those tables, the pensions people spent 40 years building, the policies meant to protect families, the retirement funds that were supposed to outlast a normal human lifespan, are suddenly unmoored. We structured civilization around mortality, and mortality has changed its terms.
11 hours into the event. I want to address something that has come up repeatedly in scientific communications now reaching us. The precise question of what stopped aging actually means for pre-existing medical conditions. This is important for listeners to understand clearly. The cessation of aging does not appear to mean the cessation of disease. Cancer continues to progress in patients who have it. Organ failure continues in many cases. The distinction, as best can be understood from current scientific communication, is between the damage already accumulated and the forward passage of biological time. The body's existing pathologies are not reversed. The clock has stopped, but the wounds from everything that happened before the clock stopped are still there. A terminal cancer patient is still fighting that cancer. They simply will not add new age-related conditions on top of it.
That distinction matters enormously, and I'm glad Daniel laid it out plainly, because I think there is a misperception forming in some of our listener messages that tonight means everyone is suddenly healthy, that illness has ended. It has not. The woman in Lyon with terminal cancer who wrote to us, she is still fighting that cancer. The man with advanced Parkinson's disease still has Parkinson's. What he does not have, apparently, is a future in which his condition is worsened by the compounding effects of continued aging. But that is a very different thing from being healed. And I think tonight of all nights we need to be careful not to let hope become inaccuracy. Real hope requires real information. Anything else is a kindness that turns cruel later.
12 hours in, exactly half a day. I want to give a comprehensive infrastructure status summary. Power grid. 7 nations have now experienced significant grid disruptions due to demand surges. Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nigeria, Ecuador, Bulgaria, Peru, and Haiti. 3 of those, Haiti, Bangladesh, and Ecuador, are experiencing near total grid failures in their major population centers. Water treatment. 14 cities globally have reported water system disruptions as staff abandon posts or fail to maintain operations. Hospital capacity. The WHO now estimates global hospital systems are at an average of 137% of their listed capacity. In Egypt, Brazil, the Philippines, and India, individual hospital complexes are reporting capacity figures above 200%. Military forces in 41 countries have been deployed in domestic civil support roles.
12 hours. A full half of a day sitting in the most extraordinary 24 hours our species has ever experienced. I have been trying to measure how different the world feels now compared to when we came on air, and the answer is entirely different, even though nothing in the visible physical world has changed. The sun rose in the east where it always rises. The streets outside the studio look like streets. But what has changed is the thing beneath the physical world. The assumption that underpinned everything. The certainty that time moves forward inside human bodies the way it always has. That assumption is gone. And with it, a structure so fundamental we never had to name it before tonight. We received a message from a teacher in Nairobi, Kenya. I showed up this morning because someone had to. I still don't know what to tell my students, but I was there.
13 hours in. I want to report on several cities that have become significant focal points in the global picture. In Mumbai, India, a gathering estimated at over 1 million people has formed along the seafront at Marine Drive. This is among the largest spontaneous public gatherings in recorded history, and appears to be entirely peaceful. Citizens came to watch the dawn together over the Arabian Sea. In Mexico City, massive gatherings have formed in the Zocalo, the central plaza, estimated at several 100,000. In Istanbul, Turkey, the Bosphorus waterfront is reportedly filled with people who came out to sit by the water in the dark. In Cairo, thousands gathered along the Nile. These are not protests. They are not riots. They are people who could not stay inside and who needed open sky and other human beings. No violence has been reported at any of them.
Those gatherings move me more than almost anything else reported tonight, and I think they tell us something worth naming carefully. When we are most frightened, when the framework of everything we understood about life is suddenly in question, most of us, most of the time, do not reach for destruction. We reach for each other. We reach for open sky and familiar landscapes and the simple reassurance of other breathing bodies nearby. 1 million people at Marine Drive watching the sun come up over the Arabian Sea, not knowing whether they are celebrating or mourning, whether this night has been a gift or a catastrophe. Just watching the light come. There is something in that image I think the world will need to hold on to in the months ahead.
14 hours in. Scientific reporting has advanced substantially. The consensus forming among research teams, still preliminary, still caveated, is hardening around several conclusions. Teams in Lausanne, Cambridge, UK, and MIT in Massachusetts are converging on a hypothesis they are describing as a global epigenetic reset event. In plain language, something triggered a simultaneous alteration of the epigenetic mechanisms that regulate aging-related genes across the entire human species at the same instant. Epigenetics refers to the system of molecular mechanisms that control how genes express themselves without altering the underlying DNA. The hypothesis is that these mechanisms received, in effect, a new instruction simultaneously across 8 billion people, with no geographic variation, no delay, no exceptions. What sent that instruction is entirely unknown. There is no candidate mechanism. None.
What sent that instruction? I have been sitting with that question for an hour and I cannot get comfortable with any answer. Not a natural one, not a supernatural one, because everything that might explain this is more frightening in its implications than the event itself. If it was natural, some cosmic ray event, some atmospheric threshold, some unknown resonance, then it could happen again. It could reverse itself. If it was not natural, if something with the capacity to alter human biology on a planetary scale chose to do this, then what we understand about our place in the universe has just changed completely. I am not advocating any position. I am saying that sitting with the question of cause is, in some ways, harder than sitting with the fact of the effect.
15 hours in. I have an updated global death toll. Confirmed fatalities attributable to secondary effects of this event now stand at 2,341. The largest contributing incidents include a crowd crush at a hospital complex in Delhi, India, during the early morning hours of this event. 112 confirmed dead, over 400 injured. A structural failure of an overloaded pedestrian bridge in Dhaka, Bangladesh. where evacuation-related crowd movement overloaded a bridge rated for a fraction of the weight placed on it. 207 confirmed dead. An explosion at a power generation facility in Lahore, Pakistan, where overnight operators abandoned their posts or were too distracted to respond to automated safety alerts. 172 dead. Highway pileup events across the continental United States account for a combined total exceeding 300 fatalities over the last 12 hours alone.
2,341 in 15 hours. I want to say that without commentary for a moment because the number deserves to be said clearly and completely. And I want to add one dimension to Daniel's reporting that the categories do not capture. Among the deaths being investigated in multiple countries where medical assistance in dying is legally practiced, there are cases of people who had scheduled procedures that were halted when the legal and medical framework for assisted death became uncertain tonight, and who, in their distress, took matters into their own hands. The authorities handling those cases are asking that we not speculate further, and I will honor that. But those people were real. Their situations were real, and they are part of this story.
16 hours in. Communications infrastructure globally. Internet traffic is running at approximately 320% of normal peak levels across all major networks. Content delivery networks have experienced multiple cascading failures. Several major social media platforms have been intermittently unavailable across large portions of the globe throughout the last 6 hours. The telecommunications backbone across South Asia experienced a significant network failure 4 hours ago, leaving an estimated 400 million people in India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan with severely degraded or no mobile communications. Satellite communication providers report demand surging far beyond capacity. In terms of broadcast radio and television, many stations have gone dark due to staff departures, power failures, or technical overloads. Blackout radio is among a smaller number of stations maintaining continuous broadcast, and we are committed to staying with you for as long as is necessary.
We are committed to staying with you. I mean that. Whatever comes next, we are here. And the messages arriving from listeners around the world, from people who are frightened and alone, who cannot reach their families, who are sitting in darkness because the power is out and they have a battery radio, and we are what they have right now. Those messages are why we do this work. A listener from Karachi, Pakistan, with communications failing around him, writes, "The phones are down. The lights are out. I have a small radio and I am listening to you. I do not know what is happening, but hearing voices helps. Please keep talking. Please keep being there. We hear you." That message is the reason we have not left this desk and will not leave it.
17 hours in, I want to give our listeners the most current scientific assessment. At the 17-hour mark, the following has been established to the highest available degree of certainty. Cellular senescence has ceased globally and remains ceased. No reversal has been detected in any tested sample across 17 continuous hours of observation. Telomere degradation has stopped. All measurable markers of biological aging have flatlined on every instrument in every laboratory currently running tests. The effect is uniform across the entire human population with no demographic, geographic, or biological variation. The cause remains unknown. No government, no institution, and no scientific body has produced a credible mechanism of causation. Over 200 research institutions across 30 nations are actively investigating. The honest scientific answer, 17 hours in, is we do not know.
We do not know. I think those words, spoken by scientists, by officials, by governments, are actually some of the most important words of this broadcast, because honesty about the limits of knowledge is what makes trust possible. When authorities admit they do not know, people can actually believe them when they say they are working on it. I have read a lot of official statements in this career that tried to project certainty where there was none, and those statements always broke something. Some piece of public trust that takes years to rebuild. Tonight, the most powerful institutions on Earth are admitting they do not know what happened. And I think that honesty, uncomfortable as it is one of the few things holding the social fabric together right now.
18 hours in. A significant legal and social question has begun generating urgent governmental attention, and I want to walk through it carefully. The question of what happens to financial systems built on mortality assumptions. In the absence of aging-related death, the actuarial and legal frameworks underlying trillions of dollars in life insurance policies, pension funds, social security systems, and retirement accounts have become legally incoherent. The United States Treasury Department issued a statement 90 minutes ago announcing an emergency review of all federally backed financial instruments tied to mortality assumptions. The Bank of England, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan have issued parallel statements. What this means practically is that the question, "How long will I live?" which was the mathematical foundation of modern finance, no longer has a calculable answer.
The financial system was built on the certainty of human death. I keep returning to that sentence because it makes visible something that was always true, but that we never had to look at directly. Every pension, every insurance policy, every retirement savings plan, all of it rested on the statistical inevitability that human beings die within a predictable range of time. Remove that certainty, and you reveal that the entire architecture of financial security was built on the fact of human mortality. And what frightens me is not the abstract financial disruption, but the people whose security was built on those instruments. The retired school teacher, the factory worker who paid into a pension for 35 years, the widow whose husband's life insurance was meant to carry her through. Those people are watching the foundation of their security become uncertain tonight, on top of everything else.
19 hours in. I have received, through official wire channels, the full text of a statement delivered 40 minutes ago by the UN Secretary General at an emergency session of the Security Council in New York. I will read the relevant portions. Quote, "The United Nations is confronting an event of unprecedented character and scope. All member nations have confirmed the reports of global cessation of biological aging. The Security Council has voted unanimously, and I want to emphasize unanimously, to declare this a global humanitarian event of maximum priority. All member nations are called upon to share resources, information, and personnel in support of affected populations worldwide. We do not yet know the cause of this event. We do not yet know whether it is permanent. We do not yet know whether it will reverse. But we know this. What we do in the hours and days ahead will define the capacity of human civilization to face the unknown together." End quote.
What we do in the hours and days ahead will define the capacity of human civilization to face the unknown together. I have read a great number of official statements in my career. Most of them are carefully written to project confidence and avoid admitting ignorance. That statement admits ignorance openly and directly, and then asks something of everyone, not just of governments, of everyone. And I think that ask is justified because this is not a crisis that any government can resolve alone. This is not a crisis that science alone can resolve. This is a crisis that requires every single person in every country to decide how they are going to carry themselves through something that has no manual. And I think most people are capable of that.
Daniel Voss. 20 hours in. I want to address an emerging food system crisis that will become critical within days, if not immediately addressed. The core problem: significant portions of the global food supply chain depend on labor continuity. Truck drivers, dock workers, warehouse staff, agricultural workers, And those workforces have experienced severe disruption over the past 20 hours due to absenteeism, panic, and infrastructural failures. The United States Department of Agriculture estimates that 32% of scheduled domestic food transport movements did not occur in the last 12 hours. In Europe, the figure is 28%. In parts of sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, where supply chains are already more fragile, disruptions are more severe, with several regional food distribution networks described by aid organizations as effectively halted. This is a crisis that will not announce itself with sirens. It will arrive quietly, in empty shelves.
Food reaching people. That is the most fundamental of all human needs, and it is the need most at risk right now in the places least equipped to absorb the shortage. And I want to resist the language of percentages here, because what transport disruption means on the ground is children who will be hungry tomorrow in communities that were already struggling before tonight. We received a message from a medical worker in a rural region of South Sudan that I want to read in full because it is short and because it should not be paraphrased. It reads, "Ben, there is no food coming. There was already not enough before this. Now there is less. We need help." 3 sentences. I do not know how to answer that message, but I am not willing to pretend I did not read it.
21 hours in, I want to give a comprehensive infrastructure recovery assessment. On the positive side, major airports in North America and Western Europe are beginning to resume limited operations, estimated at between 30 and 50% of normal capacity. The FAA has lifted its ground stop advisory for all but the highest traffic corridors. The South Asian telecommunications network failure is beginning to partially restore, with service returning in parts of northern India, though Dhaka and Karachi remain largely disconnected. On the negative side, Haiti and Ecuador remain in near total grid failure with no restoration timeline. Bangladesh's grid is at 15% capacity. Hospitals on every continent remain over capacity with no structural solution possible in the near term. 43 countries now have military personnel deployed domestically in civil support roles.
21 hours. I want to share something that came to us through the wire service 15 minutes ago. Not from a government official, but from a school headmistress in Kampala, Uganda. She writes, "This morning I gathered all 500 of my students in the schoolyard. I did not know what to tell them. So I told them that something very strange has happened to the world, that none of the adults fully understand what it means yet, and that I would tell them the truth as we learn it." A 9-year-old girl in the front row raised her hand and asked, "Does this mean we never have to grow up?" And I realized I did not know the answer. She did not seem frightened by the question. She seemed genuinely curious. And I thought perhaps that is what all of us need to be right now. Not certain, just curious, just open.
22 hours in. I want to address the religious and philosophical dimension of this event more fully, because new statements and movements are emerging. In Rome, a spontaneous gathering of tens of thousands has formed outside the Vatican. People who came to pray, or simply to stand together in the presence of something ancient. In Jerusalem, unprecedented joint prayer gatherings of Jewish, Muslim, and Christian communities are being reported at multiple sites. People who disagree about nearly everything converging on the same streets tonight, because the question of what this means is larger than any of their individual answers. In India, processions have formed along the banks of the Ganges River in Varanasi. In Thailand, thousands are gathered at temple complexes from Bangkok to Chiang Mai. Something is moving through human beings tonight that does not have a name yet.
It does not have a name yet. And I think we should leave it unnamed for now because naming it too quickly would reduce it to something smaller than it is. I have been a journalist for a long time. I have covered floods, wars, epidemics, political collapses. I have sat in this chair through difficult nights. And I can say with certainty that I have never felt what I am feeling tonight, which is, and I am going to try to be accurate, a kind of stunned awareness that I am inside a moment that will be the central event of our civilization. Whatever this is, whatever it means, whatever comes next. This is the night the world changed in a way it had never changed before, and we are all inside it together.
23 hours into the event. I have an updated global death toll, and I want to give it with full context. Confirmed deaths attributable to the secondary effects of this event now stand at 8,419. The primary contributors to this number include the ongoing crowd crush and infrastructure disaster in Delhi, India, where a series of related incidents across the night has reached a confirmed death toll of 941, making it the single deadliest event-related incident globally. The Dhaka bridge collapse, confirmed at 231. The Lahore power plant explosion, 172 confirmed. Highway incidents across the United States combined over 300. Crowd crush events in Cairo, Lagos, and Manila, combined total of 267. Medication errors and hospital incidents globally, over 400 across all regions.
8,419 in 23 hours. And I want to say what must be said clearly. In a night when death itself has become philosophically uncertain, 8,419 people have died in the most concrete and ordinary of ways. Car crashes, bridge collapses, crowd crushes, power plant failures because the person who was supposed to be watching the gauges had walked away from their post to call their family. These are not abstractions. They are the human cost of the most extraordinary event in our history, paid in full by the most ordinary of circumstances. Both of those things are true simultaneously tonight. The miraculous and the mundane together as they always are in the real world.
We are approaching the 24-hour mark of this event. Before we give our summary, I want to read the most recent scientific consensus statement, issued 30 minutes ago jointly by the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control, and the European Center for Disease Prevention and Control. Quote, after 24 hours of continuous global observation, the following conclusions are reached with the highest available degree of scientific confidence. 1. Biological aging has ceased in the entire human population simultaneously. 2. No reversal of this cessation has been detected. 3. The cessation is uniform across all demographics and geographies without exception. 4. Existing disease pathologies are unaffected. Disease continues to progress independently of aging. 5. The cause of the cessation remains entirely unknown. Research is ongoing and will continue indefinitely. End quote. The word indefinitely is theirs.
24 hours, a full day. I want to read one final listener message before we move to our closing assessment. This came in 20 minutes ago from someone who signed only as Elias. He writes, I am 93 years old. I have outlived my wife, 2 of my children, and most of the people I have ever loved. I was ready. I had made my peace with going, and I was grateful for the peace I had made. And now I am told I will not go, not from time's ordinary passage. My body aches. My memory is not what it was, and now it will always be what it is. I will be always this. I don't know if that is a gift or a punishment. I think it might depend on what I choose to do with it. And I think that might be what everything always depends on. I am going to hold that. I want all of us to hold it.
Here is what we know with certainty at the 24-hour mark. Every human being on Earth, approximately 8.1 billion people, stopped aging at 22:17 UTC last night. All of them are frozen at the biological age they occupied at that precise moment. The confirmed global death toll from secondary effects stands at 9,000, 212. Haiti, Ecuador, and Bangladesh remain in acute humanitarian emergency with failed power grids, collapsed communications, and overwhelmed hospital systems. Global hospital capacity is at an average of 142%. Major financial markets remain suspended in 47 countries. 45 nations have military forces deployed domestically. Global food distribution is disrupted at a level not seen since the middle of the 20th century. Those are the facts as of this moment.
And here's what I believe as a human being who has sat in the studio for 24 hours watching this unfold. The world that existed yesterday, built on the certainty of death, organized around the arc from birth to old age to ending, that world is over. It ended last night at 22:17. What replaces it is something we do not yet have the language for, and we will need to build that language carefully, honestly, and together. We will need new laws, new medical frameworks, new economic structures, new philosophical and religious conversations that have never been had before. We will need to decide as a civilization what a life means when it does not end from the passage of time.
In the weeks and months that followed what came to be called the cessation, the world did not collapse, but it did not stabilize easily either. The 9,212 deaths recorded in the first 24 hours rose to an eventual confirmed global toll of 47,391 over the subsequent 8 days, as infrastructure failures, supply chain disruptions, and secondary crises continued to claim lives, most heavily in the most vulnerable nations. Haiti, Bangladesh, and Ecuador received emergency international assistance that stabilized their power grids within 72 hours. The Dhaka bridge disaster and the Delhi crowd crush prompted immediate international reviews of crowd management infrastructure worldwide. Hospitals remained over capacity for months, eventually adapting through the construction of hundreds of new medical facilities across 6 continents.
The global economy took 18 months to restructure in its most urgent dimensions, and years longer for its deeper foundations. Life insurance companies were nationalized in 34 countries and dissolved in 14 others, with governments assuming pension obligations through emergency fiscal frameworks. Entirely new financial models, built not around mortality but around an effectively indefinite human lifespan, were constructed slowly and imperfectly over the years that followed. They were inadequate at first. They became better. The scientific cause of the cessation was never definitively identified. Several thousand researchers dedicated their careers to the question across decades. The global epigenetic reset theory remained the leading hypothesis, widely accepted among scientists for lack of anything more credible, but never proven. No mechanism was ever confirmed.
Disease continued after the cessation. Injury continued. Accidents continued. Violence continued. People still died. They simply did not die of old age. And the conditions that accumulate specifically from aging, the additional failures, the compounding breakdowns, did not compound further. The global population, which had been expected to stabilize and then gradually decline due to aging demographics, instead began to rise, slowly at first, then with a momentum that became one of the defining pressures of the next half-century. Within 10 years, the implications for food, water, housing, land, and energy resources were severe enough to require the most coordinated global response in human history. The world's governments, for the first time, were forced into genuine, sustained international cooperation, not by idealism, but by mathematical necessity. Because 8 billion people who do not age, in a world with finite resources, required either cooperation or catastrophe.
Humanity chose cooperation, slowly, imperfectly, with enormous argument and failure and heartbreak and occasional backsliding, but it chose cooperation. There were resource conflicts, There were periods of acute shortage and genuine desperation in the most vulnerable regions. There were governments that failed and had to be rebuilt. There were social systems that collapsed and were replaced with something better, and some that were replaced with something worse, and some that took a generation to get right. The world that emerged from the cessation 10 years later was more crowded and more complicated and more contested than the world that entered it. But it was also, and I believe this, more honest. Honest about what it had always built its certainties on. Honest about who it had always left behind when it made its plans.
The 47,391 people who died in those first 8 days, from panic and infrastructure failure and crowd crushes and medication errors and the cascading consequences of a world not built for this, they are remembered. Memorials were erected on every inhabited continent within the first year. The Dhaka Bridge became a permanent installation, its broken span left standing as a monument to the cost of unpreparedness. The square in Delhi where 941 people died was renamed the Square of First Hours, and a vigil is held there every year on the anniversary. Their deaths were not caused by aging stopping. They were caused by the human response to the unknown, by panic and abandonment and overwhelmed systems and the terrible friction of a world trying to turn at speed. That is both more tragic and more preventable than any act of nature.
The old frameworks broke. New ones were built, clumsily at first, then with more skill, then with more wisdom than had existed before, because the crisis forced wisdom upon people who had not previously been required to find it. The question of whether the cessation was a gift or a curse was never settled. It remained, as the most important human questions always do, a matter of what each person chose to do with what they had been given. Elias, who wrote to us in the final hour of this broadcast, 93 years old, aching and grieving and uncertain, he kept writing to us. Over the years, we became part of his life and he became part of ours. He lived. He made himself useful in ways he had not expected. He outlived his uncertainty, which is perhaps the best any of us can hope for.
The world survived. That is the definitive answer to the definitive question. It survived imperfectly and expensively, and with enormous loss in those first days, and enormous effort in the years that followed. It survived because the people at Marine Drive watched the sun come up together, and because the nurse in Edinburgh stayed at the bedside, and because the head mistress in Kampala showed up. It survived because of the air traffic controllers who talked 23 planes home in the dark, and because of the minister in Atlanta who told his congregation the truth about what he didn't know, and because of the minister in Manila standing in Luneta Park, watching strangers put their children to sleep on the grass. It survived because human beings, when faced with the truly unknown, mostly choose to stay.
The world is still here. You are still here. And perhaps, after last night, for considerably longer than any of us had planned. What we do with that, with the extra time, the unwanted gift, the curse that might be a blessing, the blessing that might be a curse, that is the question this generation will spend its entire existence answering. There is no other answer coming. There is only what we build, one day at a time, in the world that woke up different this morning. For Blackout Radio, I'm Maya Ross. Take care of someone tonight. Take care of yourself. The world changed while we were watching. Now we have to decide what to change next.